lived on my street, to Bremerton, Washington, where there were only 8 Black kids at the high school. I stayed there for a while, but again, from there, like being in the Navy, my father was stationed in San Francisco on Treasure Island. And people aren't familiar with Treasure Island. Treasure Island is a man-made island right in the middle of the bay between Oakland and San Francisco. The high school that I went to there was Galileo High School, was close to Chinatown. So the high school that I went to, a lot of the Asian people were there, and we were bussed in from there. Then from San Francisco, I moved to Charleston, South Carolina. And it was another culture shock as well. So when I look at the places that I've been, very fortunate to live in those 3 different places. And it's a different lifestyle as well. When I say that, I remember being in Navy housing on Treasure Island, and I called ourselves, we were the kids from the land of misfit toys. We were out there by ourselves. Mass transportation shut down around 10. So normally during the week, if you didn't get back home in time, you were stuck over there and your parents were upset. So you normally stayed on Treasure Island, and we ended up being very, very close. Just a lot of different people, a lot of different ethnic backgrounds that were there in Navy housing. And it was just very, very interesting living there. But then moved to Charleston, South Carolina, and oh my gosh, it was like tribal. It went from, just everything's black and white, just very, very different. But those were good experiences for me, especially joining the Navy. And then I joined the Navy there. I think I was trying to go to college, took my SAT test, and I had little partial scholarships, but not enough. And I found out that my parents couldn't afford to help me to go to college. So a friend of mine talked me into joining the Air Force. Him and his cousin they were going to go into the Air Force. And I went to the recruiter, talked to them for a little bit. I had also checked a lot of boxes when I took my SAT test, and there was something about the Navy. But you can only imagine that I really did not want to go into the Navy. Going to 4 different high schools, going into the Navy was something that was just really not an option for me. But at that particular point in time, when funding wasn't available for me to go to school, the Navy came up with an option for me. If I enlisted in the Navy, I could go to this school called Boost School. It's called Broadened Opportunity for Officer Selection and Training. And that school was designed to increase Black and Hispanic officers in the Navy. And I ended up enlisting there, going to that particular school, receiving an NROTC scholarship, and going to Hampton University. And I would tell you a tidbit about Boost School. Boost School doesn't exist anymore. But one of the things that Boost School did back in the 80s, they were having a problem with minority officers in the Navy. So when they implemented Boost School, I think it was about 29% of minorities finished the NROTC program and came into the Navy as an officer. And Boost School boosted that number up to about 59%. 59% of the people who enrolled or started a NROTC program that was a minority, they ended up coming into the Navy. Now you would laugh, but that school does not exist anymore. It doesn't exist anymore. And unfortunately, the number of minority officers in the Navy, that number is dwindling down as well. But then, the Navy was good to me. I'm very fortunate to command 3 different ships, a Commodore, just being able to see the world and experience a lot of different things. I'm very, very fortunate about my time in the Navy, my 30 years in the Navy.
Great. Sam, you're a pro at this because you almost answered a lot of the questions I was going to follow up. It's funny you said you spent some time on Treasure Island. You guys probably won't be able to see it, but I can literally see Treasure Island behind me here. From my background, we located right off the Embarcadero. The Bay Bridge is right there. So just ironic you spent so much time there. Before we get into your actual, the details kind of your, your naval career, you mentioned one thing that stuck out to me, how you lived in so many different cities or towns because your dad was, in the armed forces. Can you talk a little bit about the contrast to each city and just, your experience as a Black man? I feel like they were probably so polar opposite, from Detroit to small town Washington to Charleston, South Carolina. Can you just talk about your experiences and what you saw different, or maybe how you felt different in different communities and different spaces?
Well, I sure can. In Bremerton, Washington, that was the first move, and I kid you not, I was very angry. I have six sisters. My sisters, they stayed in Detroit with my father, and when I moved, I didn't want to go anywhere or do anything. And Bremerton, Washington, was just a very, very different place for me. When I ended up letting my guard down and interacting with people. Again, I go back to being in Navy housing, because when you're in Navy housing, you end up having some type of a group that you associate with. And even though it was a different place for me, the Navy housing and the families that lived in Navy housing, we kind of hung out together, we stayed together, and it kind of made that transition a little easier for me. But it was different. I was telling someone that you would think that I would have experienced racism probably in that small town or in South Carolina, but the place that I actually experienced racism was in San Francisco. It was just, just a different, something that I just didn't expect. When I look back at it now, I would expect that in Charleston, but Charleston, although the division was there, you could just tell by how we were and how tribal we were at that time in my life in high school. But San Francisco, it was telling a story about a friend of mine working in an ice cream parlor. And I was talking about Treasure Island, the mass transportation that closes at, the last bus is like at 10:30. So if you miss that bus and your parents have to come get you, they're not pretty happy about that. So I had a friend who was working, and he said, 3 nights out of the week, he had to close the ice cream store. And I said, well, hey, you know what? I'll come over and help you close up whenever you had to do it, so that we would make the last bus back. And so, I did that for a couple weeks, maybe it was about 3 weeks. And then one day he told me, hey, you know what, Sam, you can't come to the store anymore. And I was like, really? Well, why? I said, and he said, well, the owner said she doesn't want any Black people working in her store. And I was like, I'm not really working. He says, yeah, I tried to explain it to her. And, the bottom line is, after a couple of weeks, my friend, a white guy, he ended up having to quit because he couldn't close the store. He kept missing the last bus back to Treasure Island to get back home. And, it was just kind of disheartening. And I was like, gosh, that's crazy. I wouldn't expect that in a metropolitan city like San Francisco. But that was probably one of the moments that kind of stood out for me, looking at that point. And then, some things that your parents do. I was telling someone that always bringing girlfriends home, introduced them to my mom, and never really thought twice about it. And I moved to San Francisco, and I said, hey, Mom, I have a new girlfriend. I'm going to bring her home. And her name was Arlene. Never really thought about it. Brought her home. My mother was very, very nice. Talked to us. I think we went bowling or something that day. And I came back home, and my mother was distraught. I was like, Mom, what's wrong? And she said, hey, do not bring that Filipino girl back in my house again. I was confused. I was like, I really don't understand. These are people who we hang out with every day. I didn't expect that from my parent. And, but again, still being able to have those particular experiences on the naval base and interacting with different people kind of shaped me to just try to interact with everyone, because, everybody has something that they bring to the table.
Right. Now, when you officially joined the Navy, like you said, it wasn't exactly in the cards. You didn't think it was in the cards when, were growing up. And then, because of financial necessity, it kind of became your best option. Uh, what was your early experience like in the Navy as a Black guy? Because, I have plenty of friends who are or were in the armed forces, but I would be lying if I said I knew the culture within some of our armed forces. It's actually something I've always been curious about. What was it like for you, as a young Black guy, joining the Navy? I know you said you kind of had a diverse background growing up on bases with a lot of different people, but what was that specifically like for you?
Well, it's funny you should say that because I went to a Hampton Institute, Hampton University, and it's a historically Black college and university. And going there for those 4 years, I'm going to say I forgot I was Black. You know, it never really, I never really thought about it, and it was just an enjoyable time. So then I remember, and I tell you a story. I joined the Navy, and there's a meeting at the officers club, and I was like, okay, great. No problem. And I go to the meeting and I'm like, oh my God, there's only a handful of Black people here. So I'm scanning the room, trying to find someone to talk to. And I see this Black guy and I walk over to him and I'm like, hey, how you doing? And he said, fine. And then walked away from me. And so it was this guy there, one of my early friends, Chris Circus. He ended up observing the whole situation, white guy. And he said, what happened there, brother? That didn't turn out well for you, did you? And I was like, no. And he says, hey, if you want somebody to talk to, you can talk to me. And that was one of my first times of realizing that, you know what, I don't have to feel uncomfortable being, the only Black person in the room. I don't have to try to search out people who look like me to try to have a conversation. I have to, open my aperture a little bit and try to enjoy some. But again, my first ship, there were only 2 Black officers on the ship, and I think my friend Les, he transferred not even 2 months after I was there, and it was very challenging. But one good thing about ships are about performance. There's work to do. It's close knit, and if you do your job and do your job well, things normally work out for you a little bit. So like I said, as long as you did a good job, worked hard. But there were some things that I think, not just with the Navy, but with the military in general, about equal opportunity, racism. I mean, that is drilled. That training won't be tolerated. What the Navy policies are, you do it yearly. You do it for new arrivals on board the ship, and really, regardless, somewhat of your rank, everyone went through that. So that normally kind of cut down just blatant racism, out in the open, because it just wasn't going to be tolerated based on, the policies and things that you had. Now, granted, there were some things that were there that you would have to address when it came up, but nothing really out of the ordinary, just because of the Navy's policy, and I would say how unforgiving they are when something comes up. Because not only probably that if it's documented, whoever it is, it's not good for them at all.
Right. All right. Well, that's good to hear. Now one of our main focus points this month within CommonBondz is microaggressions. I guess for those who don't know what microaggressions are, Sam, do you mind explaining what microaggressions are to you?
Okay, sure. Microaggressions, from my perspective, are different acts of discrimination against some either racial or ethnic group, and it's either it's subtle, it could be unintentional, but it's some type of discrimination that happens, and a lot of times, sometimes people take it for granted, and sometimes they don't. Like I said, some of them are overt, but sometimes it just happens there, and the things that people live with, day in and day out, and you just have to figure out how to address them and move on with that as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's probably is easier, said than done, but how are some ways people, because like you said, a lot of times microaggressions could be subconscious. You don't even know you're doing them, but what are some ways in your opinion that people can combat that? And if you can, give an example of that ever happening to you, so maybe you could paint it in a way where people can understand better what they are.
Okay. Well, you always have the one that has probably happened to almost every Black man. You go somewhere and you walk by a white lady and she grabs a purse.
Yeah.
That happens. I can look back in my life and see that happening on numerous occasions. I would tell you the one that I always laugh at now that I have to uh, um, always be conscious of is, you're walking in a parking lot and you're walking in a parking lot and somebody's getting out of their car and you're walking to your car. And the only time that it bothers me is when something like this happens. I have eye contact with someone and you're like saying, hi, how are you? And then as soon as they walk by you, it appears they pull out their remote and they lock their car door as you're walking by it. And granted, a lot of times people forget to lock their car doors, but whenever you have that eye contact with someone and something like that happens, to me, it's kind of something that kind of bothers you. Well, or speaking, I told someone that being in your uniform kind of gives you a different perspective. So, in a Navy town, I go out after work, I have my uniform on, and oh my gosh, people are talking to me, people are friendly, I'm getting help. And, I could go to the same store and not have my uniform on, and the atmosphere is different. People aren't talking to you. It seems like they're not trying to help you. But I found that one of the things to do is one, when you interact with someone, you try to remember their name, you try to talk to them, you try to interact with them, you kind of break that mode of what they're doing. And then you surprise them when, they realize who you are and they've talked to you before. And, you just have to change that thinking. Everybody that comes into a store, if it's your job to be cordial and be cordial and nice to everyone. That happens a lot as well. But like I said, in my uniform, I used to notice it all the time. Just a big difference when that happened.
Yeah, I think stores are where I personally notice it most. You notice, a sales associate super gung ho on helping and serving someone else, and you're standing looking around saying, hey, I'm a customer too. And like you said, sometimes if I'm on my way to work, if I'm wearing my suit, I usually don't have to worry about that. But if I'm dressed in my typical sweatpants, jeans,
Right.
a hat, you can definitely feel the difference. And it's not always intentional, but a lot of the times it is,
Yeah.
whether they're subconscious or not.
I was thinking about this. I was looking back. I remember a house that we bought in Ocean View, and they had like a little development there. It was only 7 houses that was there. And I remember one day I got up and I went outside and, I don't think that I was dressed, too bad. And so I'm out in the yard and they're walking around doing something and they're walking toward the house. So I said, hi, how are you? They said, I'm fine. How are you? And they walked past me. And I'm like, hmm. So they walked up to the door and they're ringing the doorbell. And I'm like, okay, how can I help you? They were looking for the owner. I said, how can I help you? And they said, we're looking for the owner. And I said, I live here. And they were like, oh, the attitude, oh, can I talk to you about something? I was like, no, no, you can't. I said, because there was nothing about me that I believe that would make you think that I don't live there. But when I continued to talk to them about it or try to engage with them, they weren't seeing it. They weren't recognizing, oh my gosh, this person, he lives here. And so, that was kind of disheartening as well. And I think I have a couple other things in that particular neighborhood talking about how you interact. And, I think every Black man has an issue with police. And so, you get up in the morning, when you would normally come home, I would take my ID card and I would leave it by the door. It was a detached garage. So normally I would leave it right there. So when I would go into the garage, I would grab my ID and leave. So this one particular morning, I got in the car and I drove off and I left my ID. And it wasn't completely dark, it was, a little bit before sunrise. And so normally when I make a right, I just made a U-turn, went back to my house, made another U-turn, parked on the side. My car's running, lights are on, jumped out the car, ran to the garage, hit the little door to grab my ID, and I come running back out. When I came running back out, I ran into police. And of course, when I ran into them, we kind of ran, came toward each other. And, I was startled. They were startled. They grabbing their weapons. I was like, whoa, 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 what's going on? And they said, we saw somebody run back here. I'm like, yeah, that was me. I left my ID card in the house. Now, I had my khakis on. It's a Navy town. They're parked in front of my car. My car's running. I have the blue sticker on my car. I have my rank insignia on the car. But they didn't see any of that. All they saw was this guy, black guy, I'm assuming, running toward this house in this neighborhood, brand new neighborhood. And I was, like I said, I was annoyed at it. But, I ended up having to, like I said, when I look back at it now, I probably should have reported or something, but I didn't. But then I had another interaction with a different police in the same neighborhood. In the morning, doing yard work, walking toward the alley where the detached garage was. I ended up walking around and the police car was turning in. And this gentleman rolled down his window and says, hey, how are you? I said, I'm fine. How are you? He says, I'm fine. He says, what you doing today? I said, I'm probably going to do some yard work today. He says, I wish I was at home doing yard work. I said, hey, I wish I wasn't. He said, have a good day. And so it just appeared to me two different ways that people were policing. One person saw somebody running and that guy's doing something wrong. Another guy just interacting with me, just talking to me. And, he's assessing me just by the things that I was saying, how I was interacting and what I was doing with them. But two different things. But I just couldn't understand why it couldn't be that way all the time. Just somebody talking to you, interacting with you. Because everybody that don't look like you, they're not a criminal.
Right. Yeah. So, in a nutshell, just to kind of recap that stories and encapsulate everything, microaggressions, they can be subtle, they can be not so subtle.
Right.
But they're always actions based on assumptions of someone because of their skin color.
Right.
And they can be demoralizing, even if nobody says anything, like you said, it just made you mad that you walk into your car and she clutched her purse. And
Right.
you may not even gone home and spoke on it to your wife, but it probably irked you for a couple hours. You know what I mean?
Right.
So yeah, those are our microaggressions. Obviously, guys, if you guys have any questions with anything or want to ask Sam something, do not hesitate to enter the chat function of this program. But I'm going to move forward. And Sam, excuse me, because I don't really know how it works, in the armed force. So forgive my ignorance, but I know you were a captain, so I assume you had to work your way up to that rank
Yes.
when you joined. What was that process, working your way up to that rank? And once you became a captain, how did, I guess, your relationships change with some of your peers and those under you? Did you have any issues of trying to lead your group, being though you were a black man?
Well, I think that in anything, you have to treat people how you want to be treated. And that's one of the things that you do when you're in command or in the Navy. I say progressing through. I was fortunate to have command at three different levels: at a lieutenant commander level, a commander level, and a captain level. And, for me, it allowed me to come up with the way to have my own command climate, how I would set it up, how I let people perceive me, to ensure that they knew that everything that I was trying to do, it wasn't about me. It was about the ship. It was about doing the mission. And if that's what you can do, if you can do your job and do your job very well, if you can make sure that you can make work an enjoyable place to be at, hey, I'm looking out for you and I'm trying to do everything for you. And, you know, we end up going to a lot of different schools in the Navy that try to tell you how to formulate that idea. And they have, you know, different ways of doing it. But I found, again, when I think when April was talking about how I combat racism, those things that I said, I use that not just for racism, but anything that I do, whatever task it is, you have to be educated by it. You got to make sure you know what it is. You have to make sure that you're ethical at all times. Always do right. You know, empathy, always give people a chance. You have to be able to look at it from their particular point of view. And then you got to control your emotions. And really, you know, for me, it's turning off those emotions. You know, sometimes you put that leadership hat on and you're trying to do something and, you know, the emotions, they can run pretty high. But whenever you're able to control that, and I laughed because Mike posted something about Kyle Carver. He was talking about listening. And that was one of the things too that you have to be able to do is just listen to people, and people see when you're trying to do right. And I think that was the best thing about being in the Navy, and going through that. When you're leading people as a junior officer or leading a ship of over, you know, 2,000 men, they know when you're telling the truth. They know when you're trying to do right. And you know, that's one of the things that I told someone. I said, every time you're talking to somebody, we usually call a captain's call, where you go over the 1MC and you have to say something. And, you know, believe it or not, you would try to jot down everything that you wanted to talk about and everything that you said. Because if you said something, it had to be the gospel. It had to happen. You couldn't go back on your word. You had to, you know, and so, you know, making sure that people believe and trust you is something that every command, if you can do that, you can have a great command.
Awesome. And how long were you in the Navy?
I was in the Navy about 30 years.
Word. So looking back, when you first entered, it wasn't, I guess, the most ideal situation, like you said, because it wasn't something that you expected to do. But after 30 years, how do you look back on your experience in the Navy, and what did you take most from it?
When I look back at it, the people, I can see some things that, you know, based on how I interacted with people, I may have been the cause of some things, you know, but the Navy for me was the best time, especially being in command. I'll always go back. Everybody wants to be in command. That's the goal. If you're a surface warfare officer, is to have command. And when you can have command 4 times, it's a blessing. But again, when you're in there, things happen. And so I tell you a quick story about the first time that I was in command. It's on a small ship. It's a mine countermeasure ship. It's only about 80 people on board. And so I'm in my office one day, and my executive officer comes over and says, "Hey, the chief staff officer, he wants to talk to you." I was like, "Well, fine, just transfer the call." He says, No. He wants you to come over to his office." And I was like, "Okay, what is it about?" He said he didn't say. So, okay, then obviously there's something wrong, I guess. So, you know, I go over there, and the commander says, "I need to talk to you about a discrimination problem that you have on your ship." And I'm like, "Okay, oh my gosh, you know, I don't really know what this is." You know, and I'm just going through my head trying to figure it out. And I have no idea what he's talking about. So he says, "Hey, there's been a report that you guys allow people to use the N word on the ship." And I said, "What?" He says, "Yes, I know exactly what he's talking about." When he said that, I said, I know what you're talking about. I know who made the report. I said, there was this YM1 who was married to a black girl. He's a white guy. And he was around some young black guys, and they were using an N word among themselves. And he put in a complaint on the ship. And when I got the complaint, I said, well, okay, there, YM1, you're the senior guy there. Our policy states that if somebody says something or does something that you don't like, that you're offended by, especially being the senior person there, you're supposed to say something about it. I said, you're not supposed to wait and then put in a complaint. I said, you could have fixed that right there. I said, that's what you're supposed to do. That's the training that we go through. That's how we're supposed to do it. I said, so what you really need to do is go back and find those young guys, find their supervisor, talk to them about it, and get it straight. I said, but I'm not, you know, you didn't handle it right. There's a way to handle it. This is how it is. You're a senior guy. Go make it happen. So then I said, I'm just annoyed because, you know, the chief staff officer, he says, yeah, okay, Sam, I got it. So I said, so let me make sure that I understand. What makes you think, and now I have to put a little caveat on it. I'm Black. My executive officer is Black. The next highest officer on the ship is, we're Black. And I'm saying, so you think that all Black people just use the N word and it's okay? And he says, no, that's not what I'm saying. So I said, okay. I said, do you know what they call my ship? And he, you know, had a, you know, glassy look on his face. And I said, I do. I said, they call my ship the Soul Patrol. I said, have you corrected people on that? Have you said anything about that? And if people don't know what the Soul Patrol is, just do me a favor sometime today. Do Soul Patrol and the movie Cadence. Once you see that, you'll understand why, you know, it's not appropriate. But again, he's going to call me in for this, thinking that I'm going to allow people to use the N word on the ship, but not correct people about calling my ship the Soul Patrol because the top people on the ship are Black. Just very, very interesting.
Yeah, 100%. Now, over your 30 years as a leader, I know you mentioned earlier in our chat, and I think this is just great advice in general. As a leader, you got to just lead by example and do the right thing. But how did you notice people responded the best when you were leading? Well, you know, after 30 years is a long time. So after a while, and once you got to the end of your naval career, you know, I guess what was always your strategy on how to work with people and how to speak with people and how to get the best out of the people under your control?
I would tell you it was a young, well, he wasn't really young at the time. I was young. He was a warrant officer, Bosun Rosado. And he said, you know, never tell somebody to do something that you won't do. And I was like, okay. And so, you know, I would find myself, you know, we used to tell people when you're leaving the ship, take a bag of trash, take it to the dumpster. That's what we used to do. And I would always make sure when I'm leaving the ship, I freaking taking a bag of trash like everybody else. Or if I'm walking around the ship and something's dirty or something's on there, I'm going to pick it up. They would see that. And I think the thing that helped me the most is I made sure people knew that there was nothing that I would not do. If there was something, if I'm walking by and something needs to be done in the engineering spaces, if it's some oil or something that was spilled or something like that, I'd grab my rag, I'd wipe it, I'd pick it up, and, you know, don't take it away from them. I say, hey, no big deal, no problem. But I think that when you let people know that, you know, you care about them, you care about their job, and you will do the same things that you ask them to do, people will follow you almost anyway, especially if you're always honest and being truthful with them about it and trying to be fair. One of the things is we have captain's mass, and it always bothered me at captain's mass that some commanding officers would do, and captain's mass is like we'll call it people's court. And, you know, you can either restrict them to the ship or take money from them, reduce them in rank. And sometimes some commanding officers would do one thing for married people and do one thing for single people. And regardless of what you did, that's not what people see. So if they were a different color or a different something like that, they wouldn't see the married, single, you know, don't take money from them, don't restrict them to the ship. And I was like, hey, you know what? If you do the crime, you're going to do the time. And everybody, it was my standard. They knew what it was. And it was like, hey, if you get that, If you do that, you know what you're going to get. And it doesn't matter if you're married, doesn't matter if you're single. On the other hand, you had to make sure that, for me, I hated taking money from people, because you can take money from people because, you know, it could really hurt their families. It could hurt a lot of people. So, you know, granted, I didn't take a lot of money from people, but the punishment was consistent throughout. And when people would see that you would be consistent throughout, it just set the standard for everything. You walk it. I think you walk it like you talk it. You have to set that standard and do it. And if you do that, gosh, people will do anything for you, I think.
Great. Now, last question, and then I'll get to some questions from the audience, because we have a bunch coming in. But we usually ask everyone we speak to this question, especially based on your experiences, because you have such diverse experiences. So what would your personal message be with the audience on how to handle interpersonal racism when they experience it, when they see it? Because a lot of people on this panel would like to do more to help combat what we see happening in our society, and want to be someone who can spark change, even if it's in their personal singular life, in their bubble. They want to see change. What would be your best advice for those people, especially our allies? That's a hard two-word combination. To help and address interpersonal racism.
Okay, and I'm gonna get to that answer, but I used to always say that the average person never wakes up and says, "Hey, you know what? How can I be a racist today? How can I mess this up today?" I used to say that the average person is that way, but with the election and everything that goes on, instead of saying average, I'm going to say probably about 50%. 50% of the population, when they wake up, they want to do the right thing. And so I say, if you see racism, if you see something that happens, and if it's someone that I think that you have to be able to talk to them about it, and you have to be able to address it in a way where it's not confrontational. And sometimes you may not be able to address it right then and there. I said, because if you address it right then and there, depending on the people that are around and whatever it is, it can become, a difficult thing to talk about. But sometimes when you go back and you talk to somebody on the side, it's just you and them talking about it, they're a little bit more receptive to listening to you. So I just say that if you see racism, if you see something that happens, I believe you should be able to tell people that, that's not right. If you're able to say that, that's fine. As long as it's not something dangerous that's going to happen. But if it's somebody that you know, or somebody you interact with, or somebody that you talk to every day, and you notice it, you should go and talk to them. I mean, because I believe that's the best way of handling it, because there's nothing that's going to change someone. If they have something in their mind and they believe that it's right, it's going to take some type of repetitive thing to get them to change their mind. They're going to have some epiphany. They're going to have something to get them to say, "Hey, wait a minute, you know what? I was wrong about that." And that takes people to put it to the forefront whenever it comes out. And like I said, sometimes it's really hard, but sometimes it's really easy. Sometimes It's just letting people know, hey, they said something or did something that was wrong. You can say, hey, I was even offended by that.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's simple, but it can be difficult. But I agree. That's usually what you have to do. Now let's get to our chat function. We have a bunch of questions. This first one is from my fellow board member, Matt Scott. Thank you very much, Sam, for your time today. I recently heard a high-ranking African-American Air Force member state that his branch is getting less and less diverse, not more, especially in high-ranking positions. Is this something that you witnessed in the Navy?
Yes, it is. And I was trying to talk to people about that sometimes. And my story about it is ducks pick ducks. And, sometimes you have to make sure that you can try to overcome that and it's really, really hard. I was talking to someone about, uh, saving your round. And so you can have white senior officers. They can go to bat for people who they think that are doing a good job. They don't have to save their rounds. If somebody's doing a good job and they want to push that person forward and they want to move forward with them, hey, they can support them and that person can move up. But if you have a minority officer, he kind of saves his rounds for the number of minority people that they can really help. I have noticed that. Um, and that would be the one thing that I would try to tell people, don't save your rounds. If people are doing a good job, if people are deserving of the praise or the ranking that person needs, don't save your round, give it to them. Sometimes you have to make that hard call and tell the person, hey, somebody else, hey, the other person is just a little bit better than you. But I think that the diversity in the Navy. I was talking to you about boost school, and I was telling you about boost school in the Navy. Again, the numbers were increasing in the 80s for the number of ROTC people that completed the NROTC program and became a commissioned officer. And recently, there's a task force since the George Floyd incident happened. The Navy put together a task force to come around to figure out what's going on with the number of people. When I say people, the number of Black people or Black officers in the Navy, it is declining. And it's something that we have to do. The historically Black colleges and university, they used to be the catalyst for minority officers joining the Navy. And recently, they have been, believe it or not, at one point in time, thinking about getting rid of the NROTC units at historically Black colleges and university. Now there's a resurgence of going back and trying to rethink what they're doing and try to improve the numbers. We have a lot of my fellow Hamptonians. We're trying to do the same thing at Hampton, trying to boost the number of people interested in naval ROTC. But I do agree with that person. The numbers are dwindling down, and it's about diversity. It's about being able to notice quality talent and not saving your round and pushing that person forward.
Great answer. This one's from Kurt Kraus. I hope I said your name right, Kurt. Captain Norton, it appears that you may still live in Hampton Roads. Even before the Navy, you experienced a few places to live, and then with the Navy even more. What attracted you to stay back to the 757?
I would have to say it would be my wife. My wife is from the Eastern Shore of Virginia. And of course, she doesn't hear, I'm the captain of my ship, but obviously she makes the calls and the course corrections that we're making. And so we've lived here our whole life. I think that I have lived here on and off. I would either do a geographical bachelor tour somewhere, going somewhere, but we always came back to Hampton Roads. And Hampton Roads is just home for us. It's specifically my wife. My family, my mother and them, they moved here before she passed. My sisters used to live here at one point in time as well. And you just love it. I think it's a lot of things. I like Norfolk because it's not a huge city. We got the 7 cities, but it's not like a DC, although the traffic sometimes may fool you and think that you're in DC. But I just love the 757. I love the people. Went to college here. My wife's family's here. And we're going to be here until the end.
Awesome. Happy wife, happy life,
That's right.
All right. So this is from April. Sam, it sounds like you have ingrained in you an upbringing that I had, that you treat people the way you want to be treated. Have you found that white people reciprocated? I found that on the surface, white people have reciprocated, but then those microaggressions surface. Have you found that to be true?
Yeah, I do believe that's true as well. And again, I think that you can't be discouraged by it sometimes. But again, you do have to call people out as well. Again, it may be unintentional where they do it, or it could be intentional. But I think that when it happens, you have to call people out on it. Again, during this particular time frame, I had a lot of fellow officers who I had a particular, I would say, opinion of. And I would tell you that my opinion has changed over the past 4 years, because it appears that although we went through all this training and you say that, hey, you want to do the right thing, and hey, you want to be a leader and you want to do that, you can't turn that on and off. If you're doing that for 30 years and that's what you're all about, that should be in your everyday life. And you should be able to stand up for people. You should be able, when you know something is wrong, you should let people know that it's wrong. And sometimes, not sometimes, but here recently, I have come to the conclusion that some of the people who I thought that would stand up and say, hey, you know what, this is not right. Not so much. And so again, April, that is absolutely right. You think that you think one thing, but then underneath the surface is something else.
Okay, this is from Billy Pace. Captain Norton, you have had your experiences in the Navy as you rose through the ranks. With your wife in corporate America, did you compare and contrast the past military versus civilian? Was one easier than the other?
That's a good question. And that's a friend of mine, because I figured he was going to try to come up with a question that was going to be difficult. I kind of told Mike that was going to happen. So he must have been sitting around. But I would tell you that the good thing for my wife and I is that we were sounding boards for each other. We were able, I was able to talk to her about the things that happened to me and how I would address it. She was able to talk to me about the things that happened to her. And we were able to try to combine our efforts to make it work. But again, when I still look back at it all, working hard, people noticing how, you want to be successful and being successful, they end up going to bat for you. They end up trying to do things for you. But it is a similarity that's there. I would say in the Navy, the way that they're doing things in the Navy, the way they do promotion boards, the way that they do it, they try to take, all the guesswork out of it. Now, granted, it's not 100%, perfect, but the way that they used to do it, I believe that it kind of worked, because you always moved up to a certain extent. You could move up in rank, and I would say once you got up to about the commander level, it was more, I believe, like in the corporate world. When I say personal, I'm talking about the jobs that you have, the admirals that you work for, name recognition. I remember I was telling someone was telling me, I was asking about a promotion board or something for myself. And they said, Sam, they were looking at who signed your fit reps. They weren't looking at, the verbiage in it of saying, hey, you did a great job. They were looking at who signed them, and if they could say, I know that person. And so to me, you have to make sure that you interact with people. You have to make sure that people know your name. I look back at the times where I made my career milestones and the different boards that were there. I could look at the board and I would see the makeup of the board, and I would see people who either, for me, I used to do engineering training. So I ended up training a lot of different ships and helping, COs, they don't want to fail their engineering assessment. And like I said, I don't think I did anything out of the ordinary. I just tried to do the best job that I could. I tried to tell them the things that they needed to do. And I would tell them, hey, if you don't do this, if you can't do this, you're going to fail. This is the recipe for success. And I think a lot of them appreciated the way that, I talked, the way that I trained. If I had to come back with my team, I would do that as well. And at the end of the day, when they had to pick someone and you're going through these promotion boards, I believe that, they saw my name, they remembered who I was, they remembered the things that I've done, and, you moved along. But again, I think it works that way early in the Navy, but then there is a similarity in the civilian world when you get, in senior management. It's about who who's trying to help you, who your advocate is. I don't want to call them a mentor, because I have mentors, but they were not advocates.
Right. All right, Cap, we got two more questions. I want to get them both in because they're both really good questions. This is from Tim. When entering the Navy, is there any emphasis on conversation around differences in identity? Is there a promotion of learning about each other's stories?
Well, that is funny you should say that. I would say in the Navy, in the military in general, we do that all the time. No matter where you go, no matter what you do, you're going to have um, a committee on it. And I talk about the Navy, a committee on the ship. And the ship, we celebrate, every ethnic holiday. You always have, something to make sure that everybody realizes where they're from. It's important, not just Black History Month, but we did it for everyone, and we did that, and those were really kind of the best times when I look back at it, because you were able to learn about different people, and it all revolves around food. I hate to say it, the first thing is you're going to have some menu based on whatever you're doing, but then after that, they would talk about their culture. They would train people and have some type of I don't want to say a ceremony, but you would learn something about that culture more than just the food, and you would appreciate other people.
Awesome. And then last one from Matt Scott. It was kind of a follow-up, and I think you might have answered this somewhat in your last response, but are there lessons that military teachers in regards to treating fellow soldiers equally that us American civilians, especially white people, can put into practice?
Well, I would say that one of the things that I've always said is you always give people the benefit of the doubt. I don't think that the average person wakes up and says, hey, I just want to go to work and mess this up today. That's my plan for today. And so I think that once you realize that and realize that everybody has something, they're bringing something to the table. Now, the majority of the people are bringing something to the table, because there are some people you need to cut loose. But I think that if you're open to listening to people, if you're open to trying to help people, guide them and talk to them, sometimes people just need to be told what to do and how to do it. And if you take the time to do that, I do a quick story. You're supposed to have a mentor in the Navy. They tell you somebody's supposed to talk to you about your career and help you move on. I was in the Navy for 17 years before another senior officer talked to me about my career path and what I'm doing. I had a lot of people, hey, my supposedly being a mentor, but no one ever really sitting down and talking to me, telling me the things that I need to do, telling me, hey, these are your fit reps. These are the things that are right. And that maybe it's 17, maybe around the 15-year point is probably about right. And that's something that should happen, from the time that you're an ensign to the time that you're a commander or a captain. And that was something that I learned that I ended up doing with everyone that worked for me. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to show you. And if I have to do an evaluation and you're not my number one, and you're not going to be in the promotable rank, have no shame in your game. Don't make somebody else make that guy sign that paper. You do it right in front of him. You talk to him about it. You tell him the things that they're doing wrong. You tell them the things that will make them better. And I think that people appreciate that. And again, I think that's one of the things that you have to do. You have to talk to people. Don't give a glowing evaluation if you really don't mean it.
Right.
Give some quality feedback to people. If you do that, I think it'll help.
All right, Sam, thank you so much. I'm sorry we went about 3 minutes over, but
Jason.
Huh?
Hey, it's
Yeah.
Mike. Listen, there's a couple more questions out there, and we kind of have a philosophy that we want to try to answer all of them. So, Sam, if you're open and the participants are open to go a little bit longer, I know Kurt had a follow-up question and John had a question. So, if you guys are, I would love to address those questions if you scroll down a little more. Can you see them?
Yeah, I didn't even scroll down.
Yeah, we got a lot of them today, which is great. So, folks are
Carl. Yeah, I see Carl Krause's follow-up to the 757. Are we learning and open to being more inclusive, trying to learn the pain that our Black brothers and sisters have lived through?
I don't know if I can say yay or nay to that. One of the things that I did learn, and I'm going to talk about the election. My wife and I, we wanted to figure out something to do, and one of the things that we talked about, which led us to CommonBondz and as well. I said, you know what? I need to volunteer. I need to interact with people. I need to make sure that people see me, interact with me, and I can change their, perception of Black people. Because sometimes the only perception, and I'm going to probably get off track. I remember joining the Navy and talking to someone, and someone said that the first time, and this of course is in the 80s, the first time that they saw a Black person was when they joined the Navy. And you would think that wouldn't happen in the 80s, but it did. When I say saw one, really interacted with them on a personal level. But I'm unsure about the 757, and if we're moving forward. I'm going to tell you that there's a lot of talk. There's a lot of things that people are doing, especially here on the Eastern Shore. The Eastern Shore is very what's the word? Divided when it comes to people. The different railroad tracks and where you live. Black people are in this particular part of the neighborhood or other area of the Eastern Shore, and white people are in this particular one. You do see them interacting on a personal level at times, but I am not sure about the world really changing. I do believe that we are open to it. I do believe that we have to continue to try to make change. I believe that we have to continue to try to interact with people. But I think it's a lot of work and a lot of time. It's not going to be something that happens overnight, because, we're talking about it, or, there's a protest here, or you're going to pass some regulation or some program. I think it's going to take, years and years of change to really put it out there and to see something appreciable, if that makes sense.
Great question. And I believe a couple of these were just comments, Mike.
Yeah.
But the last question, though, is from John Quinn.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. From John, what do you think about the benefits of a military enlistment for someone who may not have had the education, access, or success or benefit of a role model or mentor in their lives? I've seen many who get so much out of that experience and also can help with further education or technical skills for a career in a civilian life. Should it be promoted as a great career enhancement step? And then in parentheses, he says, some of the best recruitment ads do a good job of painting that picture.
Well, I would tell you that the military has a lot to offer to people. If you don't know what you're going to do, and if you, and I always go back to money as well. The GI Bill is a great bill. Whether you use it for college or not isn't the point. But if you join the Navy or the military in general, now don't get me wrong, I am a little biased when it comes to different branches of the service and what you can get out of it. But I think it is a great place to start if you don't know what you want to do. However, I do believe that you really need to talk to someone. That young person needs to talk to someone, and don't just follow the recruiter's information as gospel, because again, depending on what the requirements are, the demand for the Navy, because it's all based on the needs of the Navy. You can go into and say, I want to do this, but if the numbers are the numbers and they don't need that particular rating, they're not going to offer it to you. And so you have to understand that. And when that happens, sometimes you'll be led astray. But overall, I believe the military for young people, if you really don't know what you're doing, 3 years, 4 years, you can see the world a little bit from the Navy standpoint, and you can get the GI Bill. And if you want to go to school, to go to college, or if you want to go to a technical school, that bill is great. That bill provides tuition, and it also provides a stipend, especially if they're single, for their room and board as well.
Great.
I have the GI Bill that I don't have anyone to give it to because I don't have any children. So I think I'm gonna take a class myself on how to be a better husband.
Nice. Well, Sam, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to turn over the conversation to Mike, but I appreciate the insight and, allowing me to moderate this conversation with you. I took a lot out of it, and I'm sure some of the members of our audience did, because we're still pretty much at a packed house that started at 3 o'clock. I think this is the longest one we've had. We try to only keep people for an hour because we know everybody's time is precious, but we really do appreciate you.
I appreciate it as well. I enjoy the conversations that I've listened to. I'm going to listen to all the other ones that come up because it's a different perspective. And I think getting a different perspective from someone else kind of helps you understand things just a little bit better. And I enjoyed it. I think if I'm ever asked to talk again and talk about something else, I am more than willing. But thanks for having me.
Thanks, Sam. Hey, everybody. This is Mike. I'm the co-founder and board chair of CommonBondz. And first and foremost, Sam, just thank you for promoting our cause so well. I mean, one of the things when April and I started CommonBondz, we wanted to do was certainly offer an educational, multi-channel educational approach to educating people about racism against African Americans. The thing that resonated with me the most is my conversations with April, understanding the personal stories. And we provide the videos, we provide the books, people can ask questions and they do, which is great. But until you can hear the personal stories of how this has impacted people, that was a game changer for me, and I believe is a game changer for a whole lot of other people. And you certainly have shared some wonderful history and knowledge and advisement with us, which I'm greatly appreciative of, and I'm sure the folks on the call are as well. So thank you so much for doing that. Just a couple of other things. One of the things that you've also done pretty well, all of you, is positioned Sam Norton as one of our future speakers, and we're looking forward to having her speak, sometime in the near future as we start to talk about some specific topics around institutional, structural, systematic racism and her experiences in corporate America with that. But one thing I also wanted to bring up is really to talk about the responsibilities. Lydia, you had a great comment that I wanted to just bring up because I think it really resonates to what we're trying to do at CommonBondz, and I really appreciate you putting it on here. And it was, as a white person, I wish my Black colleagues would have spoken to me about my unintentional microaggressions I'm learning now, but would have preferred to learn early in my life. And the education for me is because in the past I felt that way as well. But at the end of the day, it's our responsibility as whites to listen. It's to listen, it's to learn, and then to lead. And we've got to establish a culture that, we understand these microaggressions by listening, and that, as Sam brought up, when these things occur, you have to speak out. But when a white person hears that from another white person, we have to speak out. And that's some of the responsibilities that we bring to the table in the collaboration that we have in collectively leading this effort to eliminate racism. So I really appreciate you bringing that up, and I really appreciate you joining and everybody joining. For African-American colleagues to share your experiences. I know that's very, very difficult, and April continuously educates me on a daily basis of the difficulty of having to share, how to be a good person. And for the white folks, it's really, again, it's to listen, learn, and be part of leading. So thanks all of you for attending. One plug or a couple plugs. Thursday, we have another speaker series with Karen Spencer Kelly. Karen is a attorney and runs a diversity and inclusion consulting organization in Philadelphia. She's a Harvard grad. And one of the things Karen is really going to address is a lot of the questions that folks have had since we've established CommonBondz, and questions that came up today is, how do I address diversity and inclusion in the place I work or in home? How do I build a culture? How do I be involved? How do I manage conflict? How do I address situations that have been brought up to me that I'm uncomfortable in doing that? And Karen's going to help us with a lot of those pointers on how to do that based on her experiences in her business, because her business is to help organizations develop a diversity, equity, and inclusion culture as well as how to handle conflict within that culture and barriers within that culture. So I encourage you to join that conversation. And then in December, our topic of the month is white privilege. And so we're going to talk a lot about white privilege, what it is, why it's perceived the way it is, and the differences in how privilege is defined. And we're going to have a variety of different speakers, some young folks, both white and African American, who have grown up in privilege from a wealth perspective, but have taken on the mantra of driving privilege and inclusion from an all-in perspective. And then we're going to have two senior executives from two of the four largest banks in the country, who are going to join us and talk about kind of how they have become woke, for lack of a better term. You know, how the George Floyd murders have had them reflect and reach out to personal relationships they have to learn more, and what they've done to learn more and become educated. But not only that, the actions they're taking as leaders within their organizations to help drive a better understanding of an education on racism and what they have the power to do to eliminate it. So really, really appreciate you guys taking the time, and look forward to seeing you again on Thursday. If you're not able to make it Thursday, have a wonderful and safe Thanksgiving. Follow us on all social media on CommonBondz, on our website, CommonBondz.org. And thank you again for attending, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good night.
Good night, everyone.